I've been joining my friend and colleague, Tony Tonkin, on live feeds on his YouTube channel, The Tony Tonkin Show, for some months now. Around 4 months ago, we discussed my views on Christianity. I'm not going to repeat all that I said about it, but suffice it to say that in my long considered opinion, the world would be a better place if Christianity was flushed down the toilet of history where it belongs. The person who prompted this video is a prime example of why I despise Christianity. During that discussion, a viewer, I'll call her Jane, it could be John, because he or she didn't have the courage to put a name to their opinion, they raised the topic of abortion. She claimed that babies were born alive and left to die by doctors and nurses, that they were aborted up until birth and were ripped out of their wombs and left to die in kidney dishes. I had the temerity to ask her to back up her claims. What was her evidence? Her initial response was to repeat herself. I explained that repeating something doesn't mean that it's true, I asked her for verifiable evidence to back up her claim. She pointed me to other claims, and then to a Dr. Joanne Howe, who made exactly the same sort of claims. In fact, I think Jane got a lot of her stuff from Joanne Howe. Like Jane, Dr. Howe cited no evidence. Dr. Howe is a Catholic anti-abortion activist and a lawyer with a doctorate in immigration law. She's not a medical doctor. If she was a medical doctor, or if her legal background was medical ethics, then her opinion may carry more weight. I've also got to say that as a Catholic, where the Catholic Church's position is officially against abortion, that's where she's coming from as well. I tried explaining to Jane what I thought would constitute good evidence. I explained that a claim is not evidence. Neither is someone else making the same sort of claim, or that the number of people making a claim has any bearing on its truth, or that people have believed something for a long time is not evidence that it's true. It says nothing about the truth of the claim. You'd expect a lawyer to understand what constitutes good evidence, but Dr. Howe uses the same types of arguments that Jane uses, and for that reason, I discount her opinion. I tried explaining to Jane that anecdotes are interesting but are pretty much worthless as evidence unless you can provide empirical, independently verifiable evidence to back the claim up. It's data that counts. As your information, Jane, the plural of anecdote is not data, it's anecdotes. Jane demonstrated in her comments that she wasn't really interested in learning what constitutes good evidence, nor was she prepared to consider an opponent's point of view or to answer their questions, something that is typical of the self-righteous, holier-than-thou types like Jane. I'm going to make some other videos addressing other things that Jane said, but I want to make something truly clear to her in this one, and then I'll explain my position on abortion. Jane, I did not chicken out and run away as you asserted in a comment a couple of weeks ago. My life doesn't revolve around you. I don't sit at the computer all day waiting with bated breath to read pearls of wisdom that you may have written. I've not been able to reply to you sooner because my wife has been extremely ill and I've spent all day, every day, caring for her. Now, to put the record straight about my position on abortion. I'd like to say that I'm the author of what I'm about to say, but I am not dishonest and I'm not going to take credit for somebody else's work. I don't know who wrote it, but it perfectly sums up my position on abortion. And if I knew who the author was, I would certainly name them. Now, contrary to what Jane thinks, I am not pro-murdering babies. I am pro-Becky, who found out at her 20-week anatomy scan that the infant she'd been so excited to bring into this world had developed without life-sustaining organs. I'm pro-Susan, who was sexually assaulted on her way home from work, only to come to the horrific realization that her assailant had impregnated her when she got a positive pregnancy test a month later. I'm pro-Teresa, who hemorrhaged due to a placental abruption, causing her parents, her spouse, and children to have to make the impossible decision on whether to save her life or that of her unborn child. I'm pro-little Kathy, who had her innocence ripped away from someone that she should have been able to trust, such as her father or a priest, and her 11-year-old body just isn't mature enough to bear the consequence of that betrayal. I'm pro-Melissa, who lives paycheck to paycheck and must choose between bringing another child into poverty or feeding the children she already has because her spouse walked out on her. I'm pro-Brittany, who realizes that she is in no way financially, emotionally, or physically able to raise a child. I'm pro-Emily, who went through IVF, ending up with 6 viable implanted eggs requiring selective reduction to ensure her safety and a safe number of fetuses. I'm pro-Jessica, who's finally getting the strength to get away from her physically abusive spouse, only to find that she's carrying that monstrous child. I'm pro-Vanessa, who went into her confirmation appointment after years of trying to conceive, only to hear silence where there should have been a heartbeat. I'm pro-Lindsay, who lost her virginity in high school because of a broken condom and now must choose whether to be a teenage mum or just a teenager. And I'm pro-Courtney, who just found out she's already 13 weeks along, but the egg never made it out of her fallopian tube, so she either terminates the pregnancy or risks dying from internal bleeding. I'm not pro-Jane and her self-righteous, holier-than-thou position. If people like Jane were to have their way, there would be no abortions, but there would be tens of thousands of women and teenage girls dying every year because a ban on abortion won't make them go away. We'd be back to the good old days of women visiting backstreet abortionists, having the procedure carried out by people with no surgical skills in conditions that are not sterile, using instruments that are not sterile. Or we'd be back to the good old days of women resorting to other means such as coat hangers or pounding on their abdomens to try to induce abortion. It seems that none of the above is something that has ever entered Jane's mind. I'm certain that Jane's views on abortion are based on what she thinks the Bible has to say about it. She thinks that her God condemns it. I asked her that during that interview with Tony months ago. All I got from Jane was crickets. No attempt was made by her to answer the question, so I'm going to let her or tell her what the Bible actually says about abortion. In the book of Numbers, in chapter 5, there's a description of what a man must do if he suspects his wife has been unfaithful. He takes it to the local rabbi and explains that he thinks his wife has been cheating. The rabbi whips up this concoction which the poor woman is forced to drink. According to the book of Numbers, if she had been unfaithful, her womb would discharge. Now, every day of the year in every country on the planet, pregnancies naturally end when the woman's womb discharges in what we call a miscarriage. When we induce a miscarriage, we call it an abortion. Numbers 5 explicitly describes a method in which a miscarriage can be induced in a woman. In other words, it describes how to perform an abortion. That tells me that because the Bible is meant to be the word of God, God supports abortion. On a side note, this God has no issue with babies and children being killed. In the global flood, which God started after he got pissed off with mankind, there would have been millions of bloated corpses of babies floating around. In Deuteronomy, God commands the Hebrews to destroy the Amalekites, to kill every man, woman, child, and baby. In Numbers, God commands the Hebrews to destroy the Midianites, to kill every man, woman, child, and baby. In Judges 2, God tells Jephthah that if he allows him to win a battle, he must kill the first person that comes out of his house when he returns. That person turned out to be Jephthah's young daughter. Now, God could have said, no, don't kill her, but he chose not to, and the girl died. In Kings 2, some boys are teasing an old man named Elisha. They're calling him Baldy. Elisha asked God to put a stop to it. God could have said, stop it, boys. But what he did was he sent 2 female bears to kill the boys. These are just a few examples of how much Jane's God cares about children. He truly is a God of love. I can just imagine the contortions and verbal gymnastics Jane would get up to trying to justify any of those things. Maybe Jane could explain why this child-loving God allowed 22 million children to starve to death in 2024. You can argue and say that I'm pro-choice all you want, but the truth is that I'm pro-life. Their lives, the lives of women, living, breathing, sentient women and girls. You, Jane, claim to be pro-life when, in my opinion, you are pro-birth. Would you adopt and raise any of the children that you would force another woman, such as poverty-stricken Melissa, to carry to term? Would you take Brittany's baby mentioned earlier and care for that child? I doubt it. It's not about choosing which stories you personally agree with. It's about standing up for women and respecting the choices they make. You don't get to decide which situations are acceptable, Jane, and neither do I. If you don't want an abortion, don't have one. Women's rights are meant to protect all women, no matter their circumstances. That includes yours, Jane. Yours too. Women's rights are human rights. It's her body, it's her choice.